Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. All sorts of things to talk about. Resignation by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, so we're going to be talking about the VA scandal and what that might mean. We'll get into all sorts of religious liberty stories, and some of these are head shakers where you just can't even believe we even have to explain this to various individuals, so we'll talk about that. Also, maybe a little bit later, we'll get into some of the foreign policy issues that were surfaced in a speech that the president gave before West Point, and I think that will be certainly of interest. And a new book out by Kelly Shackelford, so we'll be talking about that. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford here. We, as always, Penna, have lots to talk about today.
We do, and I know we're going to start with the VA scandal, and I just, there's one thing that I hope the country learns from it, and that is that these huge government bureaucracies need to be decentralized.
Yes.
We don't need to have the federal government running something that is as big as the United States Marine Corps or bigger. And there's so much in control of it that it's really socialized medicine. And then on another track, here we are marching toward the same thing in Obamacare. Yes. So we need to learn a lesson here.
Let me just put this on the table so we are aware of the fact that the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Eric Sinchenki, actually resigned today. He had a meeting with President Barack Obama and then talked about the fact that this was a health care system that is totally unacceptable. And so Obama accepted the retired four-star general's resignation with considerable regret during their Oval Office meeting. And then, of course, the big question is who will be running the agency. The interim director is the Deputy VA Secretary is Sloan Gibson, who will be running it on an interim basis. He's an individual that spent most of his life after leaving the military as a banker. So there are some that are saying we need to find somebody to actually replace the individual. But Kelly, just by letting go the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and having him say he's going to fire one or two people in Phoenix, is that enough?
Oh, I'm sure that's just going to totally clear it all up, right? It's silly, but it's how they do things.
Yeah.
And it gets to the question of, are they really going to solve the problem, or is it going to be more window dressing? I do think it's interesting that you have Penna Dexter writing her commentary on the VA situation.
Excellent, well written.
And Peggy Noonan writing her article. So
Amazing.
We've got the great women who are all
two
thinking
smart
alike.
women that I love to hear from. Yes, we're going to be talking about both of those.
And I loved Peggy Noonan's, one of her earlier things, which is something people aren't talking about, which is sort of extrapolating from what's going on in the VA. She did it on one thing, Penna did it on another. Penna did it on, look how they're handling this healthcare, and now they're about to take over everybody else's. This I thought was interesting too, because it says, and I'll just read it, Barack Obama is killing the reputation of government. He is killing the thing he loves. And she makes a really good point that, it's not just the VA, it's lots of situations. And she says that his inattention to management, his laxity, his failure to understand that government isn't magic, it's undermining what he stands for, the progressive project that says the federal government is the primary answers to the nation's woes. And so, and she's really making a great point that he is all about theater, about the visuals. He's never really managed or run anything. I mean, this is the downside to having somebody with no real experience at even running their own little company,
right,
much less the United States of America. And so he's actually harming dramatically his whole philosophy and cause because he's showing that government is inept. And it's inept even when everything would be in place to make them want to do it right, which is, can you at least take care of our veterans? And so he's really, in a number of different issues. Let's look at the healthcare system, the website, you could do a whole litany of different programs. But it's a great point. I mean, it's all about the politics. It's all about how it looks. It's all about, as she says at one point, the administration's sharpest attention goes to public relations, not reality. And that really is true. And I think everybody knows that, okay, what can he say now instead of how can we really fix the problem?
Another columnist, and of course, Peggy Noonan's with the Wall Street Journal. Kathleen Parker writes for the Washington Post, and she writes a fairly moderate to conservative column. But the one that she wrote about this was quite interesting because she said this is really a failure of the whole ideology of the left. And so it's very difficult for the White House to admit this. And instead, of course, they have a scapegoat like the head of the VA, Shinseki. Well, firing anyone is not going to fix a problem that's this big and systemic. And I loved some of the wording she used. She said that this is going to really show us that our hulking bureaucracies, that's her phrase, are too big to succeed, and it's a failure of their ideology.
Again, a lot of this happened long before his watch, but the president did come in hoping to make some changes in the VA, and so far we haven't seen any changes, and the only change we've seen so far is the regretful acceptance, and I don't know how regretful that was, whether he's pushed or jumped or shoved, of the secretary and maybe one or two people in Phoenix, which, as I think we've said before, doesn't solve the problem. Well, Kelly set you up, Penna, because you, in your piece, which we have posted today, you can go to our blog post and you will see the VA healthcare piece by Penna Dexter. Those of you that listen online, you'll hear that commentary in about a half an hour because we play it twice during the program so that people can hear it. You also talk about the idea that if you're concerned about the VA, this might be a preview of what Obamacare looks like when it really rolls out.
Yeah, I mean, with all these problems surfacing, and then we've got on a whole other track, and it really is another track because this is for our veterans. This is top-down, socialized medicine. They own the hospitals, they own the doctors, they own everything. Well, we're finding out that they can't take care of the patients, and that there are even these waiting lists that aren't even computerized, so they were hidden. You can't see them. Many people rewarded with bonuses for, quote unquote, a good performance when they're leaving a mess like this. So in order for us to try to move forward with Obamacare, I think we as conservatives looking at this and people that are looking at a free market economy, we better take a huge lesson from this debacle at the VA and not, grant any more powers to the federal government to take care of the country's health care.
Let's take a break. When we come back, though, you use the phrase perverse incentive a number of times. When we've had John Goodman on this program, he's talked about a lot of the perverse incentives in Obamacare. In other words, the incentives go the wrong way. So if indeed we can learn anything from the VA scandal, it is sometimes when government tries to do good, it in some cases even does more harm if the incentives aren't organized. And of course, that's all based upon the assumption that government can do these kinds of things and whether it should. So we're going to take a break. We'll continue our conversation for a few more minutes about the Veterans Administration. Of course, we'll open up the phones to give you a chance to join our conversation. But a little bit later, we're going to get back into what we almost always talk about on Fridays, some of these religious liberty cases. And Kelly, there are days when I read your press releases, I am convinced that you are making this up. I'm convinced that you have taken a line from The Onion or some group that puts out a phony press release. Do these people really believe these things? And apparently they do. That's why we need groups like a Liberty Institute to stand up for the law, the Constitution, but basically common sense in some of these. So we'll talk about that. And of course, we'll take your phone calls. All of it available at our website, pointofview.net. We'll continue our roundtable weekend edition right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Former Senator and presidential candidate Rick Santorum has a new book out called Blue Collar Conservatives. He covers lots of ground in the book, but I found his comments about political messaging relevant, especially in this election year. In his book and on my radio program, he pointed out how Americans perceive the two presidential candidates in 2012. Those who voted for a candidate because he cared more about people like them chose President Obama over Governor Romney by a margin of 63%. Rick Santorum concludes, even if you win the argument on political philosophy, leadership, and managerial competence, it's hard to win an election when most people don't think you care about them. You know, at a time when there was so much discussion about the 99% versus the 1%, this perception wasn't helpful. As some critics said, Mitt Romney often reminded people of the man who fired their father or closed their business. But there wasn't just a problem with the messenger. Rick Santorum argues there was also a problem with the message. The message of tax cutters from John F. Kennedy to Ronald Reagan was that a rising tide lifts all boats. While that may have been an effective message in previous decades, it doesn't seem to resonate today. Rick Santorum acknowledges that the tide may be rising, but many boats have holes of various size. For example, a lack of skills or experience, an unstable family, or no high school degree. They are sinking or stuck on the sandbar. The solution is not raising more taxes and squeezing American families even more. He says we should be renewing the pursuit of happiness and work at raising hope instead of taxes. But he also rejects the idea of focusing just on the middle class. We shouldn't be talking about social and economic classes, and the term is almost meaningless in light of the demographics on America. He instead chooses to talk about working Americans. During this campaign season, candidates and voters can learn a great deal from Rick Santorum's book. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in Weekend Edition here on Point of View. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, kind of a rash of resignations today. Eric Sinchecki is the Veterans Affairs Secretary who stepped down. Jay Carney, who is the press secretary for the White House, is stepping down. So all sorts of people are changing positions. But Penna, let me come back to this for just a minute, because we've used the phrase a few times, perverse incentives, when John Goodman has been on the program talking about the Affordable Care Act known as Obamacare. He talks about the fact that there are all sorts of things written into the law that actually make companies or individuals or doctors or hospitals do really the wrong thing. But you used the phrase a couple of times here in your piece about the perverse incentives in the VA. Talk about those, if you might.
Well, the VA has been praised by socialist-type people because it lacks perverse incentives to have too many medical tests and to overprescribe things and to overtreat people. But as we look at the VA right now, that's not the problem they're having. It's an opposite problem. And there's been a perverse incentive for them to hide their problems rather than fix them. And that's because both of these issues are because of the government. So if the government could, I know this cannot be a drastic fix because the VA is so huge and these hospitals are owned by the government. And this is not to say that the VA is not doing good work. It's just that because it's gotten so big and because of other sort of problems within it, it's leaving out so many people. And so something has to be changed. And usually a free market system, if it's implemented in a good way, it leaves out the perverse incentives, and it actually incentivizes not only good products or good services, but also a profit. that evil profit motive actually is a force for good and it's a positive incentive.
Some of the technological issues, Kelly, we were talking about last week. Federal Express. There are times when I say, I wonder where my package is. And I can get on a computer and with a minute find out where it is. I've been in other countries of the world, as you have too. I go to an ATM, I put my card in, and within seconds, it knows who I am, it knows how much I have, and I get money back. And in another country, it even gives me in the right denomination. It figures all that out instantaneously. We cannot get records from the Defense Department, the medical records from the Defense Department to the Veterans Administration. They have been spending, and I'm not exaggerating, billions with a B, billions of dollars to try to get the two systems to talk to each other. We need to bring the Veterans Administration into the 21st century, don't we?
Well, absolutely. I mean, like one of the things Peggy Noonan says in her column today is that what's happening with the president who's basically killing the reputation of government is what she's saying. She says he's allowing the federal government to become what any large institution will become unless you stop it, a slobocracy. and that is just so
Great
good.
line. Great
It's
line.
exactly right. They're becoming a slobocracy. Yeah. That's exactly what the VA is another example of. And it's because we're human beings. All of us are human beings. We're made in the image of God, and we have great potential for great things, but we're sinners, okay? And so if you give me the choice to sit on my rump and do nothing and earn money, or to actually work really, really hard and earn money, then I'll sit on my rump and do nothing and earn money. And everybody knows that. That's the way we are, okay? If you want the best out of us, you provide an incentive. And that is how this is the kind of thing that just makes you want to pull your hair out. You're like, the answer to good health care is not the government takeover of health care. It's not Obamacare. It's not the VA controlling it. You want to see a change in the VA? You introduce competition. You let those veterans take a voucher and choose where they carry that voucher. And all of a sudden, you watch all those people in the VA go, oops, I'm not going to have a job anymore if I don't up my game. That's where you'll see a difference. And people know this. They should know this. Yeah. But this is what escapes the liberal crazy mindset that the government can do all, when no, the natural state of the government is, as Peggy Noonan says, eventually a slobocracy. And that's not what you see when you go to Federal Express, because guess what? They've got to compete with UPS, and they've got to compete with everybody else, and they're going to do better because they want you to come back, and they'd like to actually make more money and have jobs in the future. That's what we need to introduce into the healthcare system.
One of the things you mentioned about the Defense Department and the VA that's happened, and I'm not sure of all the details, but I do know that the VA has increasingly covered issues of just aging that are not related to being in the military service, and so in some ways, we do owe people especially full coverage for any injuries they've suffered because they've been in the military. But some of the rest of it, I think, in a sense, if we could move to some sort of a system where people, it was either voucherized or in some way they got benefits to get private care on their own, to choose that care, to find what's close to them, to find what doesn't have a long line that they have to wait in. Some of these things would begin to work better. And we always do have to fulfill our obligations to those who have served.
We certainly do.
We have to do that. And that's not what anyone out here who is saying the VA needs to be reformed is not saying that does not need to be done. It does need to be done. But that's why everyone is so upset right now, because it's not being done.
At least this is one of those few bipartisan issues, we pointed out before. When you talk about Benghazi, you talk about Fast and Furious, you talk about the IRS, well, there's a real division. I have seen people on both sides of the aisle very upset about this, and frankly, as Peggy Noonan points out, if you are a big government liberal, you still are upset about this because it shows that big government doesn't work, and if you're conservative, you say, well, we should have had a free market in the first place. So what are your thoughts around the table before we move on? Do you think we are going to see any significant changes, or is this going to be an example of where we fire one or two people and 6 months from now nothing significant has happened in the Veterans Administration?
Well, do you know what these lines are and these people that aren't getting care? This is the term for this is called rationing. And this is what conservatives have been warning about would happen under Obamacare. Well, that is what's happening in the VA. So we better take a warning.
Is this going to be fixed? Under this president? No. I mean, this president doesn't fix things. He just does press conferences. Now, the way it could be fixed is if he actually picks somebody to head the VA that actually is an experienced executive who is a no-nonsense, get-things-done person, then yeah. Or like I mentioned last week, if he said, you know what, if the president were to go up and say, you know what, I really screwed this up. I promised to fix this when I ran for office, and I failed. And so, we're going to get on top of this, and this shouldn't be a partisan issue. Newt Gingrich is joining me, and I'm putting him in charge of the best ideas on this, and we've got some executives and we're going to fix it, and we're going to come show you how we fixed it, and we're going to have metrics on it. You could do it, but again, this is not how he operates. So unless he picks somebody who really can take all that on themselves and do it, then unfortunately, it's probably going to be more. It's like the crack in the foundation of your home that gets painted over. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what's going to happen unless something unusual happens here, and that's very unfortunate.
If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll take some of your calls on the VA, but we're going to be talking about religious liberty. One caller couldn't stay on the line. Best line of the day so far. That is, if the veterans really wanted better care, they could check into Guantanamo. And
wow.
You saw the Michael Moore film years ago. He actually was trying to see if he could get some people in there because we, in some ways, actually have treated those individuals a little better sometimes than we've treated our veterans. That's a pretty sad commentary indeed. Kelly, before we take a break, lighten it up and shake our heads at the same time, and that is there are a couple of court cases, one taking place right now. And this is amazing to me because what we are seeing is that various school administrators are just convinced that you cannot allow the school property to be used for anything that could be considered religious. What's going on there in Whitney? Well,
yeah, it's actually the court is in Hillsborough, Texas. Whitney ISD is the school district, and you had a church that thought, a lot of people don't have a Christian worldview, and we got to teach our kids a Christian worldview. So they thought, well, we'll just use the school facilities after school like all the other groups do, and we'll have a Christian worldview, training. Well, the school wouldn't let them. Anybody else could use the school, but not them. Mm-hmm. And we had to actually go into court and get a temporary restraining order. And you think, well, at least it ended there. No, they're still fighting. 2 weeks later, there's now what's called a temporary injunction hearing. And they're in court today arguing that the reason they can't allow this church to use their facilities is because of all the security risk if we allow a church.
Get those dangerous Christians in there.
They put the pastor on the stand and started asking him all of his religious beliefs, what he thought about Muslims. I mean, these people are nuts. And so anybody listening in Hillsborough ought to go to court because it would be like
right now.
Yeah, it's like an episode of, I don't know, Boss Hogg or the Beverly Hillbillies or something. And the principal who was subpoenaed to testify, the superintendent announced today in court that, well, the reason he's not following his subpoena is that he's having an anxiety attack because he was subpoenaed and they're sued in court. Well, that's the whole point with a subpoena. You come to court whether you want to or not. That's kind of the law. So, I mean, this crazy what's going on there. So we're having a fight for the most basic religious liberty, the right of a church not to be discriminated against.
We'll talk about a few more of those cases, but we'll also take your phone calls on the VA, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, let's open up the phones, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of your comments about the Veterans Administration in just a minute, but let me, if I can, come back to Kelly for a few minutes, because when we talk about this idea of religious liberty, let's stay on the education issue. One of the articles we've posted here is, can God be mentioned at a graduation? I guess we can, although we were starting to wonder whether or not a church can use a public school facility. So when we talk about these areas of education, it's important to recognize that if your school right now has intimidated or censored a valedictorian, that is unconstitutional, is it not?
Yes, and one of the things we put on our websites, because graduations are coming up around the country, is people can go right to libertyinstitute.org and they can see, here's what the law is, here's what your rights are. So, and a phone number to call if they have any questions or whatever. We have attorneys that are happy to answer those questions. But make sure that people know that, because a lot of times people give up their rights because they don't know. And this is happening all over the country. There are all kinds of valedictorians being told they can't say such and such, they can't mention their faith. Not true. And so we lay out the law for people to know what rights they have as graduations are coming around.
Speaking of rights, we have, of course, that article, God Can Be Mentioned at Graduation. One of the other ones that has been up there for some time, it's been up there since last week, churches and elections, because also a lot of churches wonder right now, some of us have already finished our primaries, some are still in the primary season, all of them, of course, going to be affected by the general election. And there are always questions, Kelly, about whether or not we can invite a speaker to come to the church, pray for that individual. Can we pass out voter guides in the church? A lot of big questions, and that's a piece that you've had up there for years. And it's just a good way for people to learn a little bit more about the rights that they have during this election season.
Yeah, it's a one-page publication, and it just says, what are your rights as a church regarding elections? What's the law? So I would encourage, if they're a pastor, get a copy of it. If you're not, give it to your pastor. The reality is that there's so much more freedom than people know. Number one, let's say the pastor themselves, they can be the campaign chairman for somebody if they want to. They can do whatever they want. They're a private citizen, right? The only issue is their organization, their church. If it's a nonprofit, 501c3 organization, you think, well, there's a lot of restrictions. No, not really. There's just a couple, and there are things that nobody would ever want to do as a church that I've seen, which is, do you want your church entity to endorse a candidate? I've never seen anybody that says, yeah, we want the First Baptist Church of so-and-so to endorse a candidate. Nobody, does that. The other thing is to give resources to one over the other. So, again, I haven't seen any churches saying, hey, we want to take some money out of the church coffers and give it to a political candidate. Again, I'm not seeing it. But all the things they want to do and that they feel called to do, as they should biblically, I want to talk to these issues. Absolutely, you have a right to do that. I want to do voters' guides. Absolutely, you have a right to do voters' guides, to pass out. There's a lot of people that do these voters' guides. I want to invite the candidates in the race. Absolutely, there's all, register their people to vote. All the list of things that churches want to do. Not only is it okay, it's totally protected under the law.
Well, Penna, we have one more thing to talk about. We have an author in our midst here, Kelly Shackelford, and as you go to the web links, you'll see Liberty Institute, Churches and Elections, but you'll also see it says Book Supreme Irony by Kelly Shackelford, and people can get an ebook version or a PDF version. Tell us more.
Well, again, I don't know what happened last year, but I was, asked to do the lecture in the Supreme Court, which they do once a year on a very important case. And so I did that. And after that, a number of people said, this needs to be, put into a book because people need to hear this story. They need to hear what you talked about. And so that's what we've done. The irony of it is you had the ACLU representing these people. Now, they were, anti-war protesters, so that seemed pretty good to the ACLU. But what they ended up doing is actually opening up the main case used now by us for protecting religious freedom in the schools. So I'm, it's sort of the supreme irony in that. But I would encourage people. It's, again, number one, it's a book that's free. I mean, we're actually giving it away because we think it's important that people understand, know our history, know what happened, and know what people's rights are. In the back, we have what people's rights are. But first, we tell the story of the Supreme Court and what happened there. So it's a good thing. People can go download it for free and read it if they want to.
Is it at the Point of View website? We put it up?
And we actually just direct people to Liberty Institute, but we have it on the Point of View website as well. So people can get a PDF version or an ebook. And I'm pretty excited. I
am too. I highly recommend it. I actually got to hear Kelly's talk at the Supreme Court. And this particular case that he mentioned, first of all, tells the story beautifully, so it's really, really engaging. Sometimes you think, I'm going to be reading, all these legal terms. Well, if you listen to Point of View, that Kelly brings it down to the level that the rest of us can understand. And the book does that. But this case is, this verdict by the U.S. Supreme Court is at risk. I mean, it's a great precedent for fighting for religious liberty in the schools, but there are lots of attacks on them, as you were just saying, and as Kelly was just saying, these graduation speeches and what goes on in the schools. There was a 10-year case here in Texas that, yes, it ended up affirming First Amendment rights of students, but boy, this was a long, hard battle. So it's important that people understand this particular case that was decided by the Supreme Court, and understand its importance in undergirding religious liberty in the schools.
And don't let the peace sign on the cover of the book scare you away either.
Well, that's why it's an irony.
That's right. That's exactly what the plaintiffs in that case wore. They wore an armband with a peace symbol on
Tinker
it.
versus Des Moines. I remember it.
Some of the veterans in my office cringed.
They were
when they said,
I can't believe this. You said he did a good job, but what did Samuel Alito, Supreme Court Justice, say?
Told him something. Well, Kelly, you tell him.
Oh, he was very gracious. He said that that's the best one he had heard.
Best one he'd ever heard.
Yeah, I'm not surprised because it's really absorbing and it was easy. I mean, we could understand it.
Yeah.
And what was great is we had a mixed audience. We had liberals, conservatives, people across the spectrum. But again, freedom is something that really should bring us together. Now, the book is not, it's a little different because we add to what was said and point out the irony, which I didn't do in the Supreme Court, and point out how the ACLU really thought they were going anti-war, but they actually ended up opening religious freedom, which I'm sure they rue the day because they never join us in these religious freedoms cases. I mean, when some student wants to, for instance, in the Poway case out in California, when a student wanted to wear a shirt about homosexuality, what the Bible said, they weren't willing to defend that. So they're not for free speech. They're for free speech only to a certain extent. But then when it comes to one of their constituency groups, like a gay rights group, they're not willing to go there. Well, that's not free speech then. Free speech is for everybody, even those you disagree with. And that was the past position of the ACLU, but clearly it's not what they're willing to do today.
The premise of that case was that students do not leave their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. I'm just paraphrasing it slightly. And again, if it's sauce for the liberal goose, it should be sauce for the conservative gander. And what you did was take a case back in the 1960s, an anti-war, anti-Vietnam War case, and said, well, the principle, if it applies to kids that want to wear a black armband or a peace symbol, if that applies in the 1960s, it still should apply in the 21st century with Christian students who should not be told that they can't bring their Bible to a reading time or cannot bring a candy cane that explains the story of the candy cane or whatever it might be. And so there is a tremendous irony in this case, but it's great that you have been able to publish this because I would encourage people to take the time and learn a very important lesson. And it's sort of a little bit of a philosophical boomerang. I don't think the ACLU back in the 1960s thought that somebody like you would be using it today.
No, I don't. I'm sure. I wonder if they'd have taken the case. But the case itself is fascinating too. I mean, there's so many stories in and around the case that I think people will really enjoy understanding the history of what really happened and how this occurred, and all the players involved. I mean, like normal situations, if you really study a lot of people involved in something major that happens, there's a lot of humor in it. I mean, there's a lot of, these are, people are flawed. And so there's a lot of crazy things that go on. And you hear about these things and you go, wow. But a lot of interesting facts. Very interesting family involved in the case, and then we actually, the two kids who at the time were kids, actually, were in the courtroom when I gave they're now in their 60s, and have a huge precedent that they'll always remember.
Well, again, Supreme Irony, the new book out. It is free. Can't do any better than that. It's something I would encourage you to get a copy of. You can download it as an ebook or as a PDF file, whatever makes the most sense for you to have. And Liberty Institute making that available today. So visit our website. We have that first web link. It says Book Supreme Irony by Kelly Shackelford. Let's take a break. When we come back, let's open up the phones. I suspect many of you have comments about religious liberty or the VA. So we'll take those calls right after this.
The Veterans Administration has long been known as the worst healthcare system in America. With over 300,000 employees, the VA is the second largest department of the federal government. Its vast network of hospitals is government financed and government operated. Demands on the VA have vastly increased in recent years, and huge numbers of troops survive war only to need care for complicated injuries. Returning vets are finding themselves having to line up and wait way too long for treatment. Some have died waiting. These are deaths that could have been prevented with timely treatment. Now we're discovering that the VA has been fudging its data, and things are even worse, much worse. An Inspector General report on 26 VA facilities is expected to reveal that they've been massaging waitlist records and hiding backlogs. We'd better not miss the message these revelations are sending us about government-run health care. As a country, we need to ask ourselves, if the government cannot make its healthcare system, a system over which it has full control, work for our vets, what makes anyone think it can run a system that will work for the rest of us? Proponents of a national healthcare system tout the VA as a model. Princeton economist and Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman called the VA a triumph of socialized medicine. As recently as 2011, Dr. Krugman wrote in his New York Times column that the VA is free from the perverse incentives created when doctors and hospitals profit from expensive tests and procedures, whether or not those procedures actually make medical sense. But, as the Wall Street Journal points out, the VA has its own perverse incentive that results in long lines, delayed care, worse outcomes, even death among patients. The VA gets a budget, and it's supposed to provide a guaranteed level of benefits. Congress keeps appropriating money, but with the exploding need and often gross mismanagement, there's never enough. So veterans wait in long lines to get, quote-unquote, free treatment from the VA. There's another perverse incentive, compensation that is too low to attract doctors, especially specialists in high-demand fields like physical therapy and gastroenterology. A centrally run system has got to have competency and transparency. Our government displayed neither in the rollout of Obamacare. Though not socialized medicine yet, this is a reminder of the dangers inherent in centralizing government power in healthcare. What do we do when so many who have served depend upon this system? Senator John McCain says that veterans have earned the right to choose where and when they get their medical care. Avik Roy of Forbes magazine says, give vets the ability to take the money that the government spends on them and use it to buy high-quality private insurance. Wait lists, inferior care, and yes, rationing are inevitable in a government-run healthcare system. We should learn from our mistakes, not repeat them. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join us, Weekend Edition, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. Our number, 1-800-351-1212. Do you think we have done enough to address the issues at the Veterans Administration? Obviously, as we've pointed out, the Secretary of the VA has stepped down. What next? And love to get your comments if you'd like to join us. 1-800-351-1212. Also have been talking about some of these religious liberty issues. I mentioned Kelly's book, The Supreme Irony. And just before we get into another topic, Kelly, it occurred to me that we just had Memorial Day weekend. And the question that a lot of people have in their minds is, if this case out of San Diego, Mount Soledad, goes the wrong way, will we have fewer memorials next Memorial Day? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean, if it goes the wrong way, absolutely. It will not only tear down, I mean, the order is tear down that Veterans Memorial in 90 days.
Wow.
But that just won't tear that one down. It'll set a precedent that'll be used to tear down memorials all over the country. So it definitely will. I would encourage people. We have a Liberty Watch that goes out once a week on summary on kind of what's happening around the country. And we have one going out, I think, tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. And I got to read an advanced copy, and Penna has one too here.
And it's really, I think, a powerful story.
It is.
Our general counsel went out just to be at that memorial at Mount Soledad and met a hero out there. And he actually said a few words at the event. But afterwards, when he realized who our general counsel was, he was just couldn't say enough about how important this memorial was and how thankful he was. And so it's really a touching, I think, really touching story. This is a guy who his life was saved because another soldier threw his body on a grenade to save his life. And anyway, it's just interesting to see the connection with the memorials. And I would just, so if anybody's out there who doesn't get the Liberty Watch, all they have to do is go to Liberty Institute and sign up. It's free, and it'll come out tomorrow. But it's really powerful, I think. This is not just some sort of joke. I mean, these memorials really are very meaningful, and that's why we have Memorial Day.
It's interesting to think about. Of course, the Mount Soledad Cross is an important cross and worth fighting for. But I had some friends who were in Washington, D.C. over the past weekend, and all the celebrations and things that go on. And they put a flag at every grave in Arlington and all these types of things. And for the ACLU to come and say, we don't agree because we don't want to be offended by some cross that's going up into the sky, it could have devastating damage, not only there, but also all these memorials across the country, including Arlington.
We're going to take some phone calls, and if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. But just before we do so, one of the things that we're passing around here is something that appeared in Christianity Today. It's written by Bradley Wright. I know him. He's at the University of Connecticut and has written some things about statistics and is a sociologist. And one of the things that he is writing about right now kind of relates to my commentary yesterday, which I called Careers to Avoid. In other words, if you're a Christian thinking about going into photography, well, what happened in New Mexico with a Christian photographer might cause you to pause. What about bakery? Well, a Christian baker in Oregon is facing both civil and criminal penalties and had her business closed down. Well, maybe I'll be a florist. Well, there's the Attorney General in Washington right now suing a Christian florist who declined to prepare a gay wedding arrangement. You can go on and on and on, and the list is very long. This piece, Penna, that you're looking at right now, faith might cost you your next job. And Bradley Wright, with some of his surveys, has concluded that there is sort of an anti-Christian bias in some professions, isn't there?
The conclusion made me shiver and shudder because his conclusion, I guess I'll go right to that first,
sure,
was, if you're a Christian, because he's kind of writing in a Christian publication to Christians, be careful about really showing your true colors too much. It might affect your job. And they did a study. It was interesting the way they did it because they had been noticing religious discrimination in all these cases out there, so they wanted to see how bad it really was. And so all these horror stories that are out there. So he and his colleague conducted this field study to test for religious discrimination, and in the job application process, not just on the job, but in the application process. And so they had thousands of resumes sent in with different hints that you might be Jewish, or you might be Muslim, or you might be an evangelical going out. And then they showed the results. And, we can talk about that in a minute. But I thought that it seemed to me, I'm not a psychologist or a sociologist, it seemed to me like it was a pretty good study, pretty extensive.
Yeah. Certainly does, but it illustrates again that what we suspected for some time is there is a bias, especially on a university campus. Some of those studies that have been done for years find out that one of the things that is not going to help you in career advancement if you're a professor is to be outspoken in your Christian faith. And of course, we already recognize that there have been a couple lawsuits engaged in that regard, but nevertheless, Penna, this piece in Christianity Today, maybe we can get Bradley right on and we'll talk about how they did the research and what they found, but it doesn't surprise us, does it, Kelly?
Yeah, and some things surprised me, which is they thought it might be different in certain areas, like maybe not as bad as in the South as it was in other parts. Turned out that it was the same everywhere, and it was discrimination everywhere. That that in this country, if you're a pagan, if you put things in your deal to make clear that you're a pagan, you do better, I think 20% better, if I'm not mistaken, than if you're a Christian or a religious whatever. The control package where none of that was mentioned is the best, but any little hint where they can pick up that you're Christian and the percentages work against you. So that's the kind of religious discrimination atmosphere we're living in, and which is why we've at Liberty Institute we've had to do a lot more of these cases now. I mean, we got the Craig James case. We have a whole swath of these cases that are now coming because the attempt going on, if you're paying attention, is whether it's Hobby Lobby and going after employers, or it's these kind of situation and going after Christian employees. The goal is to wipe faith out of the marketplace. And that's where people spend most of their waking hours. So it's very important that we fight for that.
Let's take at least one phone call in this hour. We'll get many more in the second hour here, but I thought Kelly wanted to hear this one. We'll go to Silver in California. I want you to tell a story from, 15 years ago?
Yeah, about 15 years ago, living in Granite Bay, which is by Folsom Lake, Roseville, California. My daughter's in school, and this was around about the time when all the kids were starting to wear just T-shirts with skeletons and like, I'll kill you, stuff like that, really verbal and, visual. And I'm thinking, I don't think, save your personality for at home. However, one day a boy wore a shirt to school that said, "Real men love Jesus." That's all it said. There was no cartoon, no pictures, no special font. It just said, "Real men love Jesus." Now, he ended up having to go home. They forced him to go home because they insisted that he would cover his shirt because it wasn't appropriate to wear in a public school. And he's walking by these people with just, death on them. And all it said was, "Real men love Jesus." And when you guys were talking about, left wing, right wing, whichever wing, it's okay to feel, it's okay to feel as long as you don't say what you're feeling. It's okay to be one way, but you can't be the other way. Then there is no freedom of speech in that or freedom of belief. Everybody should be entitled to how they feel about something. It's like you can't force somebody to be pro-gay. You can force a nation to be pro-gay, socially, but you can't you can't change a person's feelings and ideals.
Sure. Just before we run out of time, Kelly, I want to get your comments. Just a good example of, it's okay to have a black armband in 1969 in Des Moines, Iowa, but it's not okay to have a T-shirt that says "Real men love Jesus" when everybody else is wearing other kind of T-shirts.
Yeah, and exactly the kind of thing. Again, if they read the book Supreme Irony, one of the facts in those cases was the kids were allowed to wear the Iron Cross. I mean, they were wearing Hitler symbol. That was okay, but the armband, with the peace symbol wasn't. You can't do that in this country. And so what she just described, that boy's rights were violated, and we'd love to have represented him and had the school, get educated on the law, because that shouldn't happen. That's this country. The First Amendment applies, and kids, do have a right to express themselves respectfully while they're at school.
Let's take a break. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll continue right after this.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Jesus, I love you, how I adore you. I can't stop thinking about you. Jesus, I love you, how I adore you. I can't stop thinking about you.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View.
And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join us, it is Weekend Edition. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. First hour, we spent some time talking about the Veterans Administration. We're going to, in just a few minutes, get to the speech that the President gave at West Point, because it tells us a little bit more about our foreign policy, and we do want to direct a little time and attention there. But if you have comments left over from the first hour on the Veterans Administration, please give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. James Carafano, who used to be in the in the Department of Health and Human Services, but a part of the administration in a previous administration, has come up with ideas, create a culture of accountability at the Department of Veterans Affairs, empower employees to speak up about wrongdoings. Matter of fact, I saw one of our callers was a whistleblower. Maybe she can call back and tell what happened there. The department must be made to answer congressional inquiries in a direct, transparent, and timely manner, increase the efficiency of service delivery, and elevate the quality of care and increase medical options for our veterans. Penna was talking about that. But you do get the sense, Penna and Kelly, that if you could bring in, say, a Fred Smith of Federal Express, or maybe Newt Gingrich, a former Speaker of the House, somebody that really was serious about trying to rein in some of the inefficiencies of the Veterans Administration, you might have a chance. But I also agree with you, Penna. I think decentralizing some of this, maybe breaking it down into its constituent parts, would be helpful. When you have 1,400 different facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, and other hospitals, and all sorts of individuals that are part of the VA, it's just hard for even a good manager to get his or her handle around.
You know, the thing I worry about, this happens with this administration often when there's a crisis. They'll do something symbolic. And so what was done today, the firing of General Shinseki, I mean, maybe a couple other people will be fired. I guess they did fire someone else. Someone else, yeah, but he was already going to leave. Yeah. So it's you know, it's optics. Yeah. And that's what they engage in. But really what needs to be done, it's Congress that props up the VA. They have never failed to appropriate more and more money for the VA, but it's just never enough. And that's what happens with these behemoth departments of government. So you have to turn it into something that is actually operates under free market principles. And that's why your thought and Kelly's thought about putting somebody up there with ideas that can move it in that direction. I mean, I've seen this week, I've read everything from taking the VA hospitals and opening them up to everyone. And voucherizing, or just providing some sort of a benefit for the veterans to get their health care locally, not having to go directly to the VA facilities. And I'm sure there's just, you take the brightest minds in the country and allow them to begin thinking about things and trying things. And, the jury's out whether or not this is going to happen. But I hope that this actually does prompt some of that.
Yeah, and again, the warning is this is something where the government had more ability to do whatever they wanted to. And it's a precursor to Obamacare. I mean, it's not fully implemented yet. There's all these things being held back, but when it is implemented, it'll be like this, where there's even less ability to make sure it works right. So it's it should be a wake-up call to everybody to get rid of Obamacare right now. I mean, this shows wrong direction, warning, the sirens should go off and people should say, this is a disaster waiting to happen. We need to turn the other direction. That's exactly what we need to do with the VA. We need to have more competition, more free market principles, less government control, which is exactly what needs to happen with our health care as well.
When some things regarding Obamacare aren't working, for instance, Oregon, the exchange that they tried to have didn't work, so they dump everybody into the federal exchange. So that's the worry, is Obamacare is, federal control of health care in parts of it. So that doesn't work. So then you allow more federal control. Then you allow a single payer system, and then you have full socialized medicine. So you could go that direction, or we could go the other direction, where we just open this up. We start to implement some of the conservative ideas that are out there. And I think the Republicans, the guys in the House, the men and women in the House, are really trying to now put their ideas out there again about free market health care, because they see an opportunity to do it. I mean, when Obamacare was being debated, no one listened to those ideas. But now, this is a good time to look at those ideas.
A couple of you want to address this issue, so let's go to a few other ideas and very important insights into the Veterans Administration scandal. We'll go first to Georgia, listening on the Good News Network. Randall, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good. I'd love to hear your story.
I'm a veteran. I'm a disabled veteran, and after I got out of the military, I actually worked in the VA system for several years, coming up through it. There's a few things that I really enjoy about the VA system, but then there's a lot more things that, are kind of frustrating in that. One is that the way they give the guys the budget, when they give them an open budget, it's like they have to spend the money for, like, the outside or appearances or stuff, or, that's money that we could have been putting back into the system and taking care of some veterans with that, or hiring some more staff maybe, Another thing is that as a soldier, we're typically used to following orders. We've been trained to follow orders and obey. So when we get to the point that we get to the system and somebody says, no, you're not eligible for something, or no, you don't, you're not supposed to get this, typically the guys just turn around, and that's what's causing a lot of people to sit down there and suffer longer than they need to, because, the system needs people in there that know how to work with, soldiers, and not just civilians. Yeah. I think there needs to be more soldiers in there.
Yep, and I think you're right, because there is kind of a culture there that says, take orders, and you're not eligible for it, and they go, okay, and they walk out the door. We wouldn't do that in the private sector, but you have sort of this mindset that maybe takes that problem and prevents corrective actions, and so that gets us back to some of the accountability and maybe changing the culture, which is going to be important, because that was the first point by James Carafano, create a culture of accountability. It's an important issue. I want to get to another veteran in just a minute, but I have a break. So when we come back, we'll take another call or two related to the Veterans Administration. Then for those of you that have served in the armed forces, I suspect you also have some comments, and love to hear some of those about the president's speech at West Point. We've already posted a piece by Charles Krauthammer. We'll have a couple of others that we'll bring to the table there as well. And if you'd like to join our conversation as we talk about the VA, of course, we talked about religious liberty, and in just a minute we're going to talk about foreign policy. All those are topics appropriate for our conversation today, and you can give us a call. That number is 1-800-351-1212. If you just happen to join us in the first hour, we did spend some time talking about Kelly Shackelford's new book, and it's entitled Supreme Irony. It is free. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about this case and this precedent, which was really developed by the ACLU but has been used very effectively by various groups, including Liberty Institute, that book is available. We have a link to it on our website, and also we have information about the rights that churches have during the election period, especially this particular year, and also the question about whether or not God can be mentioned in graduation. So all of those articles, as well as our article about the VA, all on the website, pointofview.net. Let's take a break. We'll come back and take some more phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Former Senator and presidential candidate Rick Santorum has a new book out called Blue Collar Conservatives. He covers lots of ground in the book, but I found his comments about political messaging relevant, especially in this election year. In his book and on my radio program, he pointed out how Americans perceive the two presidential candidates in 2012. Those who voted for a candidate because he cared more about people like them chose President Obama over Governor Romney by a margin of 63%. Rick Santorum concludes, even if you win the argument on political philosophy, leadership, and managerial competence, it's hard to win an election when most people don't think you care about them. You know, at a time when there was so much discussion about the 99% versus the 1%, this perception wasn't helpful. As some critics said, Mitt Romney often reminded people of the man who fired their father or closed their business. But there wasn't just a problem with the messenger. Rick Santorum argues there was also a problem with the message. The message of tax cutters from John F. Kennedy to Ronald Reagan was that a rising tide lifts all boats. While that may have been an effective message in previous decades, it doesn't seem to resonate today. Rick Santorum acknowledges that the tide may be rising, but many boats have holes of various size. For example, a lack of skills or experience, an unstable family, or no high school degree. They are sinking or stuck on the sandbar. The solution is not raising more taxes and squeezing American families even more. He says we should be renewing the pursuit of happiness and work at raising hope instead of taxes. But he also rejects the idea of focusing just on the middle class. We shouldn't be talking about social and economic classes, and the term is almost meaningless in light of the demographics on America. He instead chooses to talk about working Americans. During this campaign season, candidates and voters can learn a great deal from Rick Santorum's book. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. If you'd like to join us, weekend edition, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head out to New Hampshire this time. Carol, I believe you're a veteran as well, and I'd love to get your story.
Yes, hi. I am a veteran, and I started having a situation with my arm, and 2 years went by before I got any surgery, which really didn't work, and now I'm on hold again. And, I'm just going through the rhetoric of, go here and get this checked out, go there, and it's just a lot of hurry up and wait kind of thing, which is normal in the military. But
is it a service-related injury?
It actually is not. No, but being a veteran, I'm allowed to go to the VA. So, anyways, yeah, it's just I think I've known other people in the regular go to regular hospitals who have had this done within 6 months, and now I've had it done, and it's really back to square one because they're finding out, well, it's issue B that's wrong, and now we've got to take care of that, and I just don't know how long I'm going to be waiting before that gets taken care of. And
you don't have the ability to just go to some other place, right? I mean, you have to get the services. You have to go to the VA, approved folks, and don't have the freedom to do what other people could do.
Exactly, that's true.
And and this is where we're heading. I mean, this is the problem. Is again, there's two different approaches here, right? One would be to clean the VA up. Let's allow people to choose, and let's see what happens, and let's watch the competition occur and things get better, and let's have those who have served, like Carol, to be able to get the very best help they can get. That's a much better approach, and by the way, much better approach with all of our health care, with Obamacare, than what we're trying to do, which is go off the cliff at a faster pace, So our choices, like Carol's, will be taken away when that happens.
I totally agree. I have a question. I don't know if you have any answers for me, but is there any place that I can call to say, to maybe get it hurried up a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, and you're cutting out here, but let me give you the answer. I hope you can hear it on air or off air. And that is, this is the kind of thing that your member of Congress really does provide an opportunity for. So if you're not familiar who you're a member, I start with the House of Representatives first before I go to your two senators. They oftentimes are helpful in opening doors, clearing the way. So I would certainly see if you can find the local office there in New Hampshire for your member of Congress, and see if you can contact them, because that's exactly the kinds of things that oftentimes congressional offices do.
No, that's a good point. I just heard a story earlier today of somebody who actually was a Republican and called the Republican to get help for their situation like this, and the Republican never called them back. And so they called the Democrat, and the Democrat actually solved their problem, and they've now switched parties. So
interesting.
So I would just say
services.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
You need to call. The other option is a lot of people are members of veteran service organizations, whether that be the VFW or the American Legion or the Military of the Purple Heart, the American Ex-Prisoners of War, et cetera, et cetera. Those groups, I think, would be a great place to contact as well.
Let's talk to another veteran. By the way, I haven't said that to each one of you, but we always thank our veterans for the service that they have rendered, and we are so grateful for you. And certainly, as we've just come off of Memorial Day weekend, it's an opportunity once again to remind all of us of the debt that we owe, and certainly will never be able to repay to those that have served in the armed forces. Let's go to Blake in South Carolina. I believe you're a veteran as well. Love to hear your story.
I'm a 100% total and unemployable veteran. I went in service in peacetime at 49. I wound up. Let's go to Blake.
You've got your radio on, and so we didn't really hear everything you said. Can you turn it off and repeat that?
Yeah, I will. Hey, my name is Blake. I live in South Carolina. I am a 100% unemployable total and permanent veteran. Been that way since about 96. I go to the VA hospital here in Augusta, Georgia. I've been going there since 85. I've had several operations. I don't believe I could have got any better care anywhere in the world than I have here. Now, don't get me wrong. There have been things happened, but things happen. It's beyond control.
Well, I'm glad that you got a positive story, because as you imagine, most people that are going to call probably are going to tell us stories that aren't as positive, but that is an encouragement. And so you feel like you've always been able to get the kind of treatment that you need, the kind of drugs that you need to see the doctors on a timely basis. Tell us your story, if you would.
90%, yes. I've said that nothing is perfect, okay?
Oh, sure.
The thing of it is, these veterans wants to be taken by hand and do things, everything for them. They don't want to do things on their own. I've been volunteering at this hospital 2 days a week since 95. And I see a lot of things that goes on that nobody sees.
I'm sure you do.
If my primary care doctor tells me he's going to give me a consult to the podiatrist in about 10 days, if I haven't heard something on that, I get on the phone and I say, "Hey, doc, where's my appointment at?" Now, veterans don't. A lot of these veterans don't do that.
Yeah.
And therefore, I blame some of the veterans as much as I do the doctors and the system for all of this thing that they're talking about.
You know, I remember Randall talking about the fact that sometimes they're used to taking orders, and if somebody doesn't call them back, well, they just wait, or they say, well, we don't have this drug, or we don't have this treatment. They go, okay, and they walk away. I mean, there is a sense in which part of the problem isn't on the Veterans Administration side, it's on the people that are receiving, the veterans that are receiving the treatment, but maybe...
You are entirely 100% right.
Thank you.
I've been a volunteer and helping veterans file claims since '95 on their compensation and pension and so on. And these veterans come in and talk to me, and I'm a volunteer for the Disabled American Veterans Association, which I think is the premier veteran association. I'm a member of American Legion, of VFW, the Purple Heart, several others of my divisions I was in quarter with and all this other stuff. But the thing of it is, I see that I need to take care of myself first. And if a veteran don't take care of himself first, then he is partially to blame for it all.
You know, there's a mindset right now where we're creating a culture of dependency. Penna, we've talked about this before, where it's kind of like, well, it's government, so government will take care of me. But Blake and basically Randall are reminding us we're still responsible for our own health care.
Yeah, I don't think this is only a problem with the veterans.
No,
in a sense,
not at
I mean,
all.
we were saying, okay, if we didn't get the care we wanted, we'd probably, the three of us around this table, we'd move on. We'd go find the best care.
Yeah.
We would make phone calls. We would look for the drug or whatever. But you know, this government is creating a dependency culture in society, and there's a huge sector, especially people who get things paid for by the government. And they, in many cases, probably the vast majority of cases, with folks who begin to have their lives in all the parts of their lives dependent on government, there's a sense of inertia that starts happening, and you just let it happen to you. And so, you know, it's not just in the VA. I think it's other places. And so it's better. I mean, I have read books since I was a young adult about taking charge of your own health care, because sometimes what's in the traditional medicine is not exactly the best thing. You could do other things nutritionally and exercise-wise to take charge of your own health that would mitigate your need for other interventions. And so, you know, I'm a big believer in that. And I think that to the extent we encourage people to research whatever their health problems are and find the best cures themselves, and then cooperate with the medical community also. So that's the kind of medical care that is more effective and less expensive. And instead, though, I think when you just teach people to say the doctor's God, and I'm going to do whatever, you know, the medical community says to do, and you know, as we're going to be able to trust that less and less as Obamacare takes hold if we let it.
Well, Kelly, what about this culture of dependency and this entitlement mindset that we have developed today?
Well, I think it's true, but the other thing I thought of with Blake's comments are, you know, he felt like he got good, you know, service and you know, treatment, etc., although he had to pay attention. But the problem is that if he didn't he didn't have any choice. When we force a government program, then now you're dependent upon whatever they want to offer you. And so that's the key, is that I'm sure that there would be, you know, a lot of places where people could go and get good service in the VA. But, you know, you don't have that choice. I mean, you have to go where you're told to go. And when something's a monopoly, you're kind of stuck. And it takes away your freedom, and it takes away that competition that makes everything better. So that's, I think, the ultimate solution long term, is something where there's choice, there's competition, there's an ability to choose something that's better for you, and that's, do I see them going that way? You know, probably not. It's going to be, how can we be a better government? But that's really not the answer, I don't think, for the best situation for the veterans.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll take a few more phone calls here. And if you'd like to join us this last half hour, we'll certainly give you that opportunity. Open line 1-800-351-1212. We've set forth a few priorities for the Veterans Administration and looked at the problems from the inside and the outside. But what are your thoughts? How can we make it better? How can we serve the veterans who deserve the best service and certainly deserve high honor? We'll take a break. Take your calls right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Off air, a few people are asking about that list I mentioned just a minute ago. This was done by James Carafano. And not to be confused with another individual, Joseph Califano, but James Carafano's been on this program before. Individual that is now actually at the Heritage Foundation, but listed 5 priorities to fix the VA, and one of those was the idea of a culture of accountability, and the 5th one was the idea as well of trying to increase the medical options for our veterans. Some were calling for outside involvement, which we've already talked about, and as I look at our list of calls, some of you want to address that as well. Let's go back to the phones. I think it's Savius in Georgia, WGNN. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having this program. My comment, very briefly stated, is that the hospitals aren't so much the problem as we receive excellent care, and what I've seen, they do everything they can, as well as any other hospital. But I see more problems with the administration of the VA system.
Yes.
My story is I'm a 40% disabled vet. I broke my neck in 3 places in the Philippines. And I've been trying to get 100%, and they keep coming back and saying they can't find certain things in my records. Well, it turns out that they've actually lost all of my in-house records. And there's no way to prove anything. Wow. And I've been trying this since 96, and I've contacted my congressman and haven't heard back from him either. So I'm kind of up against the wall on what to do next on this.
You know, these records are a big issue. Of course, in just a few minutes, people will hear Penna Dexter's commentary again, and my commentary, earlier this week. You just talk about the efficiency that we should have now with backup systems, being able to move medical records from the Defense Department to the VA. The idea of losing records, that's back in the days when we had paper files. How do you lose records now in this digital age when you should have backups and servers and things of that nature? It just, Savius, I think it just illustrates again, we need to move the Veterans Administration as well as the entire government bureaucracy into the 21st century. This is amazing how these kinds of problems actually exist and should not exist in this modern world where technology can solve many of these problems. So,
and it also reminds us too, and this is whether you're with the VA or even if you're just getting your own health care, that we've each got to go the extra mile. We can't trust other people to be competent. You've got to, if we get a chance, if you've got medical records right now, I say make sure you get a copy of whatever you have.
I've done that.
And that if you, I remember when I was going to have open heart surgery. I checked out who I was going to have. You ask the nurses, they can tell you the difference between those doctors, how their patients do from one to the other. And so we've got to do everything we can so that if people are incompetent, we're in the best situation we can. And it's sad, but that's just something that, we're going to have to all do, unfortunately.
Well, Savius, I appreciate you sharing that, and I would encourage you to go back to your member of Congress, because as we shared just a minute ago with Carol, they are involved in what's called constituent services, and if your congressman or congresswoman won't help you, there's another member of Congress that might. And I love your story about the Republican going to Republican, couldn't get him to do anything, so go to the Democrat, and got the service that he needed.
Well, they might be extra sensitive right now about issues regarding the VA.
So. Yeah, man, if there's ever been a time for a VA to pay attention and for members of Congress to pay attention, is during the midst of this scandal. So that may be the one positive in all of this.
And if you were to go back, if Savius was to go back to his congressman and they weren't to do anything, I would even tell my congressman, look, I've asked, I've been waiting for so and so much time. I'm going to give you a little more time, and then I'm going to go to the press.
Yeah.
I bet the congressman would just get moving on that issue.
You might even just say, I've already announced it on a national radio show. Yeah. And a lot of people already know my name. Anyway, let's take another phone call here. Is it Lana in Texas, KJRT? Thank you for calling today. Do we have Lana there? I'm going to put Lana on hold for just a minute. Maybe we need to go connect up with her again. We'll go out to Missouri then. KNEO and Don. What are you suggesting we might do?
Hi, Kerby. My thought came pretty quickly that why not tap someone like Mitt Romney? He has business experience, executive experience, government experience. He could clean this up, I would say, within the next 2 years, and then I'd vote for him for president.
Yeah. You know, there are some individuals over time that you identify are fixers. And I think if any of us around the table, I guess I'm the oldest one around the table, as I'm always reminded of, can remember what was not unfolding in the Olympics, the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, and when the individual who had been the governor and also had run for U.S. Senate but lost, goes in and uses his business experience to turn that around. I think there are some turnaround experts, and Mitt Romney certainly seems like one of those possibilities.
Yeah, except that he's the author of Romney Care in Massachusetts.
Might not be the best person to choose, but, you know, I was suggesting Fred Smith or Newt Gingrich, but, you know, let's put Mitt Romney on the table. Don, let me give you the last word, though. You were going to say something else.
No, I'm done. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to Texas there. I jumped over real quickly because I hadn't heard from her. Lana in Texas, KJRT. Thank you for calling today.
Yes, this is Lana.
Okay, said it wrong.
My biggest concern is for the young men coming back from Afghanistan and the ones that came back from Iraq and Desert Storm. However, I was a Vietnam-era vet.
Yes.
And when they told me I could get free care, free dental, free eyeglasses, free hearing aids, free medical, free drugs and medication, when I was 18 years old, that sounded wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm under the understanding that Bill Clinton balanced the budget on the back of the Veterans Administration. I now have to pay a copay of $40. I now have to pay a $15. That's for a specialty. $15 for my primary care doctor, and I have to pay $9 for my prescriptions. No matter if it's aspirin, Tylenol, or what it is, I still have to pay $9. And I have had numerous experiences. I had a needle run in my foot, and they did the surgery on the bottom of my foot instead of on the top, on the soleus, and it burst open, and I had a terrible time with that foot. I was incapacitated for quite some time because of that foot, and the surgeon that did it was not a podiatrist. They did not have a podiatrist on staff. Then I broke my foot, and I walked around with a March fracture for 7 weeks, and they kept trying to give me Valium and calm me down. I said, you don't understand, my foot hurts. And so finally I was in the waiting room, and I said, I'm not leaving until you do something about my foot. And I said, I'm going to call the congressmen, the senators, the newspapers, the radio stations. I'm going to be on television. I'm going to tell the world how you all are doing out here. Within 20 minutes, they had me on a bus, and they sent me to an outside provider, a podiatrist.
There you go.
And I had to be in a cast. He said if I hadn't have gotten in when I did, I would have had to have major surgery and have to have it pinned. And I walked around in a cast for 6 weeks because of that. And as far as I'm concerned, the VA does not give quality care, and they don't have enough doctors. Right now in Amarillo, they have one psychiatrist, and all these young men coming back threatening to commit suicide, and they can't get in to see them. It's just wrong. Somebody has got to step up to the plate and say, we're not going to do this to our vets anymore.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. You know, just think of how different that would have been if she had a voucher. I mean, eventually they ended up sending her to an outside doctor, but it makes your case, Kelly, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, the whole idea is choice and
we don't have
freedom.
a podiatrist. You know, go to a hospital where they don't have a podiatrist.
Right.
You know, go to a major clinic and they don't have a podiatrist. But they didn't have one at the
And
Veterans
here's the scary
Administration.
thing. We're all about to be in this situation. With Obamacare, I mean, this is where we're headed, where, you know, choices are taken away. I mean, look at all the people now. They don't have any choice. You know, they were supposed to be able to choose their own doctor. They were supposed to be able to choose their own. You know, you don't have to give up your plan. All lies, right? So this is exactly where all the American people are being pushed. So it really ought to be a wake-up call for people.
The demand for doctors just across the system is increasing and going to increase because the baby boom generation is getting older and they're getting all those inevitable medical problems that are coming. So you have that, and then you have lots of advances in technology that are expensive. But the pay for doctors is decreasing. And, government is putting certain limits on that pay. And so you have, just naturally, you're going to have attrition and doctors people not going to medical school, coming out and being doctors. But I keep going back to the idea that if you have a free market system where doctors can actually charge what they can get for the procedure, but then you have enough of them, you have more of them, and then you have these businesses, these medical businesses that start building up. Instead, the government is trying to squelch all that, centralize it, and so there's a fork in the road here. We got to choose which fork we're going to take.
We're going to take a break, but those of you listening online will have a chance to hear Penna Dexter's commentary on the VA healthcare. We'll come back and take a few more phone calls right after this.
The Veterans Administration has long been known as the worst healthcare system in America. With over 300,000 employees, the VA is the second largest department of the federal government. Its vast network of hospitals is government financed and government operated. Demands on the VA have vastly increased in recent years, and huge numbers of troops survive war only to need care for complicated injuries. Returning vets are finding themselves having to line up and wait way too long for treatment. Some have died waiting. These are deaths that could have been prevented with timely treatment. Now we're discovering that the VA has been fudging its data, and things are even worse, much worse. An Inspector General report on 26 VA facilities is expected to reveal that they've been massaging waitlist records and hiding backlogs. We'd better not miss the message these revelations are sending us about government-run health care. As a country, we need to ask ourselves, if the government cannot make its healthcare system, a system over which it has full control, work for our vets, what makes anyone think it can run a system that will work for the rest of us? Proponents of a national healthcare system tout the VA as a model. Princeton economist and Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman called the VA a triumph of socialized medicine. As recently as 2011, Dr. Krugman wrote in his New York Times column that the VA is free from the perverse incentives created when doctors and hospitals profit from expensive tests and procedures, whether or not those procedures actually make medical sense. But, as the Wall Street Journal points out, the VA has its own perverse incentive that results in long lines, delayed care, worse outcomes, even death among patients. The VA gets a budget, and it's supposed to provide a guaranteed level of benefits. Congress keeps appropriating money, but with the exploding need and often gross mismanagement, there's never enough. So veterans wait in long lines to get, quote-unquote, free treatment from the VA. There's another perverse incentive, compensation that is too low to attract doctors, especially specialists in high-demand fields like physical therapy and gastroenterology. A centrally run system has got to have competency and transparency. Our government displayed neither in the rollout of Obamacare. Though not socialized medicine yet, this is a reminder of the dangers inherent in centralizing government power in healthcare. What do we do when so many who have served depend upon this system? Senator John McCain says that veterans have earned the right to choose where and when they get their medical care. Avik Roy of Forbes magazine says, give vets the ability to take the money that the government spends on them and use it to buy high-quality private insurance. Wait lists, inferior care, and yes, rationing are inevitable in a government-run healthcare system. We should learn from our mistakes, not repeat them. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford with us for a few more minutes. We probably won't get to a couple of the other issues we're going to talk about today, but we did post a very important article about the speech given by the president at West Point. But since some of you wanted to stay on the Veterans Administration, that is the news of the day, obviously. Since the Secretary of Veterans Affairs has stepped down, I'd love to hear some more of your comments. So we'll stay on that topic. And if you were listening online, you could hear Penna Dexter's commentary. If not, you can read it under the Point of View blog section. I think she's done a very good job of summarizing some of the issues we've talked about today. But some of you have brought some real-life experience to this, and we want to hear another story as we go to North Carolina this time on the Good News Network. Let's go to Bobby. Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. How you doing?
I'm good. I would love to hear your story because I believe that you've worked with the Veterans Administration in some capacity trying to get compensation, but tell us your story.
Well, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I tried to get my education. They said I was denied because 40,000 of us was left out. Then after that, they told me to put in for compensation to try to get it. And I went in for that and went in for compensation. When I went in for the compensation, it was denied over and over and over again. And I was told by veterans representatives that this was a stalling tactic.
Yes.
Next thing you know, I put in, went to the board in Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem said, oh, well, we don't have that information. I said, I'm giving it to you right now. I got copies of my medical record. And I was still denied. They said, your claim has been denied. And at long last, I got to go to Washington, D.C., and I'm still waiting. That's for 22 years.
22 years.
22 years.
Mm.
And I'm not the only one that's in that kind of predicament. There's a bunch of us waiting for compensation or to be heard.
You know, there is a sense, I want to get back to the perverse incentives, Penna, that you talked about. Stay on, Bob, because I want to get back to you. But we've heard over the last couple of weeks, and some of them have been on our Friday weekend edition, other times when this has surfaced, Penna, the individuals saying, we lost your records, or delay, delay, delay. And it just seems to me that that's another one of those perverse incentives. You get rewarded for pushing people off, delaying care, having long lines. And that's not the way we should be treating our veterans.
Absolutely. This is just horrible to hear this, because the idea that your education that you were promised, your health care that you were promised, all these things, these promises are being broken. You know, I know many veterans who have gotten these benefits, and it's good. They deserve them. But in your situation, it's really a travesty. It's sad. And I know that, you know, you would think that good people, good-hearted people that are working in the system would not, put somebody on a list that's like not a real list so they don't get care. But that is what's happening.
Yeah, it is.
People's bonuses are depending upon how you perform. And when it's not the people, it's the system they've got to work in. And so, and those that try to reveal that or whistleblow are not, they're not being listened to. And that's another part of the reform, I think, is that the system for talking about this, for revealing things that are going on and the flaws, it needs to be reformed also. I feel so sad for you, Bobby. I don't really know what the answer is. I hope that you can get some of this resolved.
Well, the thing that I was looking at is that I retired, and they said because of Grand Rickman, I can't get it. The VA doctor told me because of my legs, I should be putting in for it. But when I did put in for it, as I said, please forgive me for being redundant, I was turned down. Doctors, I've been getting shots in my legs in order to walk and everything else comfortably, and I'm still waiting over and over and over. I did 22 years in the Marine Corps, and now I'm waiting 22 years.
I was just thinking about that. You spent 22 years serving the country, then you spent the last 22 years dealing with all the hassles of a government bureaucracy. And I'm not so sure which was harder, the first 22 years or the second 22 years. But it's a terrible irony, and it's not the way we should treat those of you that have served our country.
And I got they finally gave me 20% for Agent Orange for being in Vietnam. And I said, what about my legs? And there was nothing. I was turned down. And it's been proven. They don't have the records. They said, well, we're going to send away. They, meaning the VA, said, the lady told me at Winston-Salem, we got to send to Thailand to get your records. I said, how are you going to send to Thailand to get records when that base is closed down? It was in the jungle.
Yeah.
Then they said, well, we got to send to Glenview to get the records. I said, that base is closed down. But all the records that you need are right in front of you.
So let me ask a question, just out of ignorance. So if you've got a medical problem and it's pretty obvious that it's due to your military service, but they have to go back and get the original records of how you were, the way you were treated when you first sustained the injuries?
That's what I was told. But you know what? The thing is, I have complete copies of the medical record.
Yeah, and of course, well, we can't trust your records because, after all, we have to have our official records, and you know how that goes. This is all kind of bureaucratic speak, and just a good example of why you don't want a faceless, unelected bureaucrat making decisions for you. I've had, as we've talked about before, a lot of people said, well, we want Obamacare because we are tired of some actuary at some insurance company making a decision about whether or not I get this drug or this surgery. And I said, well, if you thought that was bad, it gets worse when you talk about an unelected bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that you will never meet making a decision about whether or not you get this surgery, this drug. I mean, if you thought what we have now was bad, just imagine what you have when you only have one choice, and that's the government and a bureaucrat's making those decisions
Well, and
for
let's
you.
be honest about what this is. This is rationing. That's what this is. This is, we are the government, we are in charge of this, and we do not have enough doctors and resources to care for the patients we have. So what do? Well, you start pushing people back. You say they've lost their records.
Delay.
Yeah, which, by the way, increases their problems because now you're traumatizing them psychologically in addition to whatever physical malady they're dealing with. So you're making it worse. You're lying to people. But it's rationing, and that's exactly what will happen. I mean, everybody knows that's what happens when the government takes over the system. And number one, because so many doctors are talking about retiring, that they're not going to be a part of this deal where they have to knock their fees way down and there's not a free market system. And I mean, so it's going to get worse and worse and worse. But this is rationing. That's what it is. And this is what, those involved with Obamacare admitted was part of the process, would have to be part of the process.
It has to be. Wish we had more time. I've got more callers than we have time, but you know how that goes. But if nothing else, just before we end, I know that people tune in and tune out, and Kelly, I did want to announce at least one more time, you have a book out, and it's Supreme Irony. And for listeners that missed our conversation in the first hour, just before we run out of time, talk about how they can get a free copy of that book from Liberty Institute.
They can just go to libertyinstitute.org, and you can download it. You can do it as an ebook or as a PDF. You can't get a lot of books for free, but we think it's important that people, number one, know about this important case. It's a fascinating story, I think, but also we have at the end a list of what people's rights really are. So it's kind of a twofer. You get the book and the story of the really patterned after the speech that was given at the U.S. Supreme Court, but then you also get a deal on what exactly those rights are.
Ben, I'm looking forward to next week because we have Alveda King in studio. That is the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. We have Dr. Ben Carson with us. He's got a new book out, so we'll be talking with him. And we also have Elizabeth Graham in studio with us as we talk about Texas Right to Life. We have Marvin Olasky from World Magazine and Hans van Spaskowski, who is going to be talking about the IRS, I should say, scandal. So we've got a lot to look forward to next week, but I want to thank both of you for being here. I know a lot of us will be traveling next Friday weekend edition, so it'll be one of the very few times we'll ever run a tape, but we'll get us all back together.
I'm sure it'll be a good show, though, one of the best stuff.
I'm sure it will be. And again, Kelly, congratulations. Excited about your new book, and encourage people to go to libertyinstitute.org. You can also find out more about rules for graduation, various things that churches can do during this election season. So there are all sorts of resources. Just go to pointofview.net or go immediately to Liberty Institute. You'll find them right there. Just before we run out of time, though, let me encourage you to visit that website. You're going to find some great articles. We have a video or two that we were encouraging you to watch, and some books that we've been making available, including the one with Rebecca St. James, who we talked about and talked with yesterday on Sarah's Choice. So please visit the website, pointofview.net. Have a great weekend. Want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Gerl for their work behind the scenes. We'll see you back here on Monday.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.